His Excellency Mr. Mohammed Nasheed, President of Maldives. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
The Presidency, fellow heads of states, delegates, and ladies and gentlemen. We are now in the final days of this process. This is the end game in more ways than one. The negotiations have been fraught, time-consuming, and often difficult. I think we should celebrate the progress made so far. No one expected such an historic endeavor to be easy. I am still optimistic that we can leave this meeting with a planet-saving deal. I would like to point out that during the course of the last 2 years, negotiators have tried hard to come up with a draft text that can be placed in front of heads of state tomorrow. Last night, very late last night, early in the morning, there was a text that was somewhat finalized, but again, negotiators are now unable to agree upon this text. Therefore, I am so sorry to say that come tomorrow, heads of states will not have a draft text in front of them. We will be in trouble, and we might not come up with an agreement in Copenhagen. That, in my mind, is totally unacceptable, not just only for us, but for millions and millions of people all around the world. The OSIS group has proposed a text for this purpose, and the Maldives will do its utmost to help make this outcome a reality. For us, this is more than just another meeting. This is a matter of life and death. The science is very clear. Carbon concentrations higher than 350 parts per million and temperature rises above 1.5 degrees will submerge my country, dissolve our coral reefs, turn our oceans to acid, and destabilize the planet's climate. Anyone who says that agreeing these numbers is impossible is saying that it is impossible to save us, to save our nation. This, you will agree, I cannot accept. Ladies and gentlemen, to make these 1.5 degrees and 350 goals a reality, the IPCC states that global emissions must peak by 2015 and fall rapidly thereafter. The United States say it opposes the 350 targets because the technology does not exist to make it. I would like to point out that when President Kennedy announced that the United States would want to go to the moon, there was no technology to back the president. But very soon, in fact 7 years later, man landed on moon. But I know that there is no limit to American ingenuity. This is the country that first announced it would send a man to the moon and then worked around the clock to build Apollo spacecraft. Get the politics right, and the technology will follow. Technical creativity can make great leaps for mankind. But political leadership must provide the springboard. For global emissions to peak by 2015, as science demands, industrialized countries must raise their level of ambition. They must commit to collective reduction of 40% by 2020 and 95% by 2050. But developing countries must also do their part. The rich world may have caused the climate crisis by filling our atmosphere with pollution, but two wrongs don't make a right. If all parties took to their current level of ambition at these negotiations, we will reach 650 parts per million and the world will warm 4 degrees by the end of the century. And the fact is that the majority of the future emissions rises are projected to come from developing countries. I therefore urge developing emitters, including our good friend China, to join me in recognizing that reducing emission is not a shared sacrifice, but a common opportunity. I'm sure if China shows leadership, others will follow. After all, it is not carbon that we want, but development. It is not coal that we want, but electricity. It is not oil we want, but transport. Low-carbon alternatives now exist to provide very good energy and services that we need for our development and prosperity. Developed countries created the climate crisis. Developing countries must not turn into a calamity. Therefore, I invite the leaders of big developing countries to recognize the responsibilities. I urge them to come forward at Copenhagen with quantifiable and verifiable actions to reduce emissions 30% below business as usual by 2020. Let me be plain. We urgently need to move forward. Giving us intensity targets that are close to business as usual is not acceptable at this stage. Ladies and gentlemen, I believe that you should not ask others to do something you are not prepared to do yourself. The Maldives has pledged to become carbon neutral by 2020. And I have been hugely encouraged by the steps already taken by least developed countries and small island states to begin getting their economies green. At the recent Climate of Vulnerable Forum in Mali, 11 states pledged to raise their ambitions in leading the world towards carbon neutrality. This is an enormous opportunity to reduce future emissions before fossil fuel infrastructure is built. But it cannot be done without the financial support from rich countries. I say to the industrialized world, you have the finances and much of the technology. Please help us go green. When we say this, please bear in mind that climate change negotiations have nothing at all to do with money. Maldives is a very small state. We have never received aid from European Union countries.